Good morning, everyone, and welcome to University Unitarian Church in Seattle. It's Sunday, September 13th, and we are delighted to welcome you to our worship service this morning. I am here in the chapel with my good colleague, Beth Chronister, and special music this morning from Steve Cresswell, violin and viola, and of course, our incomparable Dwight Beckmeyer and our tech crew. We're beginning a new season this day here at University Church, and so I'm hoping that if you've not looked at the Gateway or e-news recently, you will have not seen yet all of the activities that are being planned for this year. And I want to call your attention to one in particular. Next Saturday morning from 9 to noon, a BIPOC, which is a new acronym, and it means Black, Indigenous, and Other People of Color. All of those members in our local congregations in the Western region are gathering together for a virtual gathering. And information for this can be found also in our e-news and Gateway, so that you might register for that if you are a person of color or Black or Indigenous. And it's extra special for us because Justin Almeida, member here, former staff member, will be providing the opening session for that event, and Sheila Kapistani, our former moderator, will be the keynote speaker. So it promises to be a very important and meaningful and special event, and we encourage you to look up that information and register and participate and feel, hopefully, a good part of this liberal religious family. Years and years ago now, when my wife was pregnant with our first child, I served a church in Massachusetts, south of Boston, where there had not been a birth in the minister's family for nearly 45 years. So you can imagine their delight in waiting with us for the birth of our daughter, our first child. And every Sunday, as it got closer and closer, I was peppered with questions by inquisitive members. Well, is there a baby yet? Is there a baby yet? And for several weeks, I had to say, not yet, not yet. And then Lila was born on a Saturday afternoon, and that next morning, I climbed the stairs into the high pulpit, and the first thing I said was, friends, I'm wearing the Harvard Crimson today because it is the closest color that I have to pink. And the congregation exploded and stood up and cheered, and it was all joy broke loose in the meeting house that morning. I followed with, well, I'm not sure how coherent I'm going to be this morning, but let's start the service anyway. After which I walked out of the meeting house to the lobby to greet those who were in attendance that day, and one of the very important people of the congregation and town was first through and said, Mr. Luopa, what are you doing here? You need to get to the hospital immediately. Do not greet a single person this morning. And that's what I did. Well, I'm telling you the story because this morning I'm wearing blue because on Tuesday evening this past week, Annie and I became grandparents for the first time. Our younger daughter, Ulika, and her wife, Jess, had a baby boy. His name is Wyatt. And Annie and I have already been there every day helping them. And I can tell you it's the greatest thing in the universe. Some of you know we've been waiting for this moment, and it's here. And I apologize for taking a moment of personal privilege to share that news with you. Actually, I don't apologize. I'm glad to do it, and I hope that you can receive it with the love that it is meant to bring. Let us begin the service this morning.
I call us to worship with these words. We begin again. From out of our days of uncertainty and adaptation, we begin again, gathering as a community to the best of our abilities. We begin again, renewing our shared promises, reforging the relationships between generations, families, and friends, emerging into another year on the journey together. We begin again, called by our faith to love and to witness this beautiful and breaking world, to plant the seeds of justice so that our children and grandchildren might reap a harvest of peace, to courageously and fiercely embrace life, even now. Welcome to University Unitarian Church. Welcome to worship this morning. It is good to be together as best we can. Would you please join me now in singing the doxology? The words will be on the screen. On the second Sunday of each month, our congregation collects our offering to give to an organization or in support of an organization here in our local community or in the wider world that is living out the values of justice, equity, and possibility. And on this morning, we'll be receiving the offering online or through sending in a check to a long-time partnership in support of our activities at Teen Feed. And UUC has been involved with Teen Feed for 16 years. And what this means is that the UUC meal team plans, prepares, and serves 18 Teen Feed meals each year. And since March, since COVID, the team has added even more meals to fill the gaps where other teams have been unavailable. Teen Feed, located in the University District, coordinates meals 365 nights of the year by teams from congregations like ours, and with those meals now being delivered in to-go boxes since March. Since COVID has hit, Teen Feed has continued their street outreach and nightly meals. As the meals are handed out, staff are still focused on fostering relationships of trust and helping teens to identify resources and pathways towards stability and towards housing. With over 1,500 teens and young adults aged 13 to 25 on our King County streets every night, these meals are critical. And as a low-barrier connector, Teen Feeds helps homeless youth navigate resources that can feel overwhelming, now more than ever. And so on this morning, we'll be hearing from two of our families here at UUC who lend their energies to supporting Teen Feed. And following hearing from their video testaments, we will sing together hymn 360.
I'm Julia Cornell, and my family started our association with Teen Feed about 6 years ago. It was one of those times where I was in the coffee hour after church service and looking around at the tables and what they had to offer, and I noticed the Teen Feed table. And it really spoke to me. I think as a mom of a teen and a tween at that point, I thought that this was a wonderful opportunity to do something for such a vulnerable population in our community. And so my daughter, my older daughter, Amelia, and I started first. And what we both really noticed right off the bat is the role that the counselors of Teen Feed play in the organization. They have this wonderful connection with the teens that they help every time they have a meal. Just the simple act of sitting down and having conversation, and oftentimes laughter, sometimes even song. They really make this wonderful connection and with the teens that they are helping every day, which I think is a wonderful part to this organization. And now, due to COVID, we are not witness as much anymore to that interaction. But just the other week when we were working there, it really struck me again, having a conversation with one of the counselors, just how well the organization works in the fact that they use all the meals that are provided, and anything that the teens don't eat on site will actually go to other organizations where the teens will be. So sometimes it's the overnight shelters. So all that food that is donated and cooked and made into meals will be something that many teens can take advantage of, especially when the need is so great now. And then Ella also has some thoughts too.
Ever since I can remember, I've always wanted to help people. When people come up to me with a problem, my first instinct is to find the solution to the problem. The problems that I take on are on a much smaller scale than homelessness. They are problems that can be resolved in a few hours or even a week, but nothing that requires societal change like homelessness does. The homelessness crisis is a massive issue, an issue that is not going to go away overnight, and no amount of magic wand waving will cure this crisis, because the crisis is rooted in racial inequalities, the rising cost of houses, and a lack of resources for those suffering from mental health and addiction. Homelessness is such a prominent issue in our society that it can be overwhelming to try to picture how a single person could have an impact on this crisis. The overwhelming feeling is actually why I originally held off on volunteering at Teen Feed when my sister and mother began many years ago. Back then, I felt that my actions did not matter because no amount of cookies I baked or tater tots I served would have an impact on this crisis. My overwhelmed perspective changed when I walked into the basement of a church in northeast Seattle 2 years ago. That night was filled with smiling teens and people coming back for seconds and even thirds, changed my perspective on homelessness. I finally felt that my actions were helping combat the crisis of homelessness.
So before COVID, as a family, somebody needed to stay here with the kids, and so we really just supported Kurt to go. But we've been able to do some of the packaged food preparation here and then just drop it off for Teen Feed. And Mira and I have always had a heart for those who need to sleep outside for whatever reason, and so we carry shelf-stable food and socks in the car all the time. But it's been great to be able to make fun cookies and brownies and things and wrap them up and put a lot of love into them and think about the people not so much older than our kids who might be able to use that little treat and might bring a smile to their face. So it's been really rewarding to participate as a family.
Yep. So it's been, the four of us. We've got Mira here who's helped us out quite a bit. Cooper, our son, who's camera shy.
And Mira doesn't want to say anything, and Cooper doesn't even want to be on camera. So that's us.
Thank you to the Carnell and Christensen families for sharing some of what their experience with Teen Feed has been, and thank you to all of the families who work together across the age spectrum to create these meals and to continue to create these meals to support teens in need of a meal, a friend, the community's support. So this morning for our offering, anything that comes through Text to Give will go in support of our partnership with Teen Feed. You can also give online through UUC Connect or send in a check to the office with Teen Feed in the memo line. And again, thank you for your support. Would you please join me now in saying the words we say each week? This church is a community of ourselves. Its energy and resources are our energy and resources. Its wealth is what we share. When we contribute to the life of this community, we affirm our lives within it. So it is common at the beginning of the church year in Unitarian Universalist churches across our association to celebrate a ritual called water communion. And this is a ritual I grew up celebrating. And at the beginning of the church year in fall, families would come together, bringing with them little vials or jars of water from where they had been that summer, and adding them all to a common basin to signify that many streams coming back together into one body, as we do, coming back together as one community. And this year, there's been a number of different ways that churches have been having their water communion. And at UUC this last Wednesday, we had a virtual water communion during our Vespers service, in which people spoke into their microphones, sharing what a body of water that is significant to them, that they were sharing symbolically, knowing that even when we can't necessarily pour different water into the same basin, water is always interconnected. And just as we cannot be all in the same room right now, we continue to be connected. There are bonds that we have made over the years of friendship, of affection, of working together to create something larger than ourselves, and the bonds that are just inherent throughout life. And so for our meditation this morning, I offer you a water communion prayer. And in this vessel of water, it begins with the waters that were blessed by the Vespers service this last Wednesday, and I will add to it with waters from our church building. So this will be a visualization. So begin by calling to mind a body of water that is significant to you. Maybe it's a place that you visited this summer, a place near or in your home, or a place that is tucked away, special in your memory. And feel the sense of that place. The sights, the sounds, the smells. And the feeling of being in or near water. And I ask you, metaphorically or literally, for what do you thirst? May your thirst be quenched. What fires are raging in our nation, our world, or in your own being that call out for soothing rain right now? May the rains fall on the scorched earth, bringing with them life to the ashes. Water cleanses, washes hands, bathes the very young and the very old alike, protecting our health and bringing freshness. And so I ask you, what are you wanting to wash away? What fresh start are you longing for? What do you want to let go into the stream? May health, well-being, possibility, and the freshness of morning dew be yours. Water reshapes landscapes. Rivers wear away at rocks to form canyons. Glaciers carve lakes and valleys. Rain grows the forest. What changes in the landscape are you praying for? What previously seemed immovable, fixed within or beyond you, is giving way to something new. Whatever change is coming your way, and we all have changes coming our way, may you be blessed with the ability to go with the flow and to keep your head above water. Water sustains life, holds an essential secret to this weird and full of wonder existence of life in a wide, wide universe. And so may you know yourself as held by this mystery and by this miracle. Water is the birthplace of life, our first mother. We give thanks for water. Blessed be, and amen.
Earlier in my ministry, my wife and I often would teach a course on faith development in the churches I was serving in those days. And one of the books we used in that course was Paul Tillich's Dynamics of Faith. And one of the most important chapters, at least according to those students who were with us in reading the material, was on symbols and the importance of symbols. Symbols are things that point beyond themselves to something else, and they arise out of human experience quite naturally, and they are powerful enough to evoke a response. Symbols can be objects or persons or words or places. Many different kinds of things can have very powerful symbolic import. And perhaps the one symbol that is most ubiquitous and meaningful for Unitarian Universalists is the symbol of the flaming chalice. Here, accompanying me on the screen. The silver chalice, the flaming chalice as a symbol, was created in the 1940s by the Unitarian Service Committee as they were working in Eastern Europe to help resettle refugees from the war. They did a great deal of work in what was then known as Czechoslovakia. And when they were there, they were inspired in their work by a historic figure in the history of the Czech people, especially the Bohemian part of the Czech people. They were inspired by the reformer Jan Hus, who was born probably around 1372 and died in 1415. He was a Roman Catholic priest. He happened also to be the rector of the university in Prague at the time, a reformer, an innovator, a bold figure indeed. He himself was influenced by an earlier reformer, John Wycliffe in England, who had the very unpopular views a century before Hus that he was not in favor of hierarchy in religious organizations. And what he stressed more than perfection or lack of sinfulness was the development of moral character. And that as human beings approached the scriptures, they should use their own intelligence and conscience to interpret them. Can you imagine that in the 13th century in England? Wycliffe influenced Hus, and Hus decided to emphasize three things. One was that he made the bold decision to preach his sermons in the Czech language rather than the usual Latin, so that the people who were listening to him could understand what he was saying. He also decided that the elements of the Mass, the bread and the wine, should be shared with all of the people who came to the Mass. It used to be that only the priest would eat the bread and drink the wine, and then the bread was distributed among the faithful. But Hus decided that the gift of the wine should be available to all of the people because it was a natural gift available to all people anyway. And the third thing he decided was to invite the members of his congregation to help in the decision-making in running that parish or that congregation. And it has been long-standing practice in the Catholic tradition that the priest pretty much decides what's going to happen. Not so much anymore today, of course, but certainly in those days. Those were the three things that he stressed and for which he got into trouble. We have had here over the last several summers what we call Chalice Camp. We weren't able to do it this summer because of the pandemic, but just a year or two before that, Melody invited me to come and do a morning chapel service with the kids, and I thought I would use the chalice as a symbol to explain to them where it came from and what it meant, and I shared with them that information about Hus, who preached in Czech and shared the wine from the chalice, and that's why there is a chalice, we have a chalice, and that the decisions should be shared among the people. And I asked the kids, I said, what would it be like if I made all the decisions in this church? For example, what if I decided that we should have a swimming pool in the parking lot? Wouldn't that be fun to have a swimming pool in the parking lot? After which, very quickly, one of the youngsters said to me, well, it wouldn't be a very good use of our resources. Well, I'm not sure UUs are fun, but they're certainly practical, indeed. For those views, however, Jan Hus was burned at the stake in 1415 as a heretic. And so the flame that you see in the chalice is symbolic of his martyrdom on behalf of religious freedom and religious tolerance, and the effort to reach out to the people to invite them into decision-making and in sharing the gifts of creation. That's where the symbol came from. Jan Hus, a Bohemian priest in Czechoslovakia. But the chalice that you see next to me here on the screen this morning was carved by a person who was also inspired by that story and was a longtime friend of this congregation. This chalice here used to hang behind the pulpit here in the chapel for decades. We have now placed it in the main lobby as you come into the building. It was carved by a man whose name was Elias Dutch Schultz. His nickname was Dutch. 500 years after this story of Jan Hus. Dutch died in 2006 at the end of August at the age of 96. He grew up in Harlem, New York City, the son of Viennese Jewish parents. When he was 26 years old, he joined the Abraham Lincoln Battalion of the International Brigade and went to Spain to fight against the fascist forces there from 1936 to 1938. He was someone who was well acquainted with the underside of capitalism, and a communist or a socialist himself, as many secular Jews were at the time. After the war in Spain, he returned to the States, enlisted in the army, fought in the Second World War, and after the Second World War was over, he stayed in London and was among those craftsmen who helped repair the woodwork in the House of Commons in London. He returned to the States, moved to Seattle, was a longshoreman, became acquainted with Temple Beth Am here in the city, but also was a frequent attendee at services here at University Unitarian Church. And in the middle 1970s, he carved this chalice, which has hung here in this building now for nearly 50 years. Both Jan Hus and Dutch Schultz lived their lives not for themselves alone. We've heard that phrase a lot over the last several years here at University Unitarian Church. Indeed, we used it as the title or the theme for our capital campaign, not for ourselves alone. I first heard this in a speech given by Václav Havel, the former president of the Czech Republic, playwright, dissident, 16 years ago at Independence Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In that remarkable speech of his at that point, he asked, "What is it we have long suspected? What have we long projected into our myths and stories? What has lain dormant within us as a symbolic impulse? It is this," he claimed, "an awareness of being anchored in the earth, an awareness that we are not here alone, an awareness that we ought not live for ourselves alone." And he goes on to say that this deep and sometimes forgotten awareness is encoded in all the great religious traditions of the world. And he concludes by saying that the only real hope for human beings today must come from a renewal of this awareness. This awareness endows us with the capacity for self-transcendence. In today's multicultural world, these are his words, the truly reliable path to peaceful coexistence and creative cooperation must start from what is at the root of all cultures and what lies infinitely deeper in human hearts and minds than political convictions and ideological certainties. It must be rooted in our capacity to transcend ourselves, to be empowered, inspired, and bold enough to go beyond ourselves. When I was in Prague not long ago, I asked our guide whether or not the Czech people were truly enthralled with the genius of Václav Havel. And she quickly replied to me, "Well, I wish it were so," she said. "Half the population is too stupid to understand what he means. Let us not be among them, but hopefully have a glimmer of the profound truth of what he is saying in that address. For the symbols of the flaming chalice and the lives of Jan Hus and Dutch Schultz and the words of Václav Havel point all of these things to one truth. And so the purpose of a church like this, like ours, our beloved community of memory and hope, is to inspire us to renewing this experience and renewing this quality of life, to live our lives with joyous awareness that we are not here alone, that we are surrounded by myriad living forms of life, nor ought we to live our own lives just for ourselves, but to give them over on behalf of all creation. For we are integral parts, as Havel said, of a higher, mysterious entity we call life on earth. And we are privileged to be players in this profound pageant of goodness. Welcome back, my friends, to UUC. Let us have a good year together. We will need to be innovative and creative as we deal with the challenges that face us these days. Terrible, terrible wildfires here on the West Coast, economic pressures that are unprecedented for so many of us, for so many of you. An election we are all quite concerned about coming up in just a few months. All of these things, of course, are greatly on our minds. But as I saw on a sign on an elementary school last night as I was passing it, the sign said, "We can do anything virtually together." Let it be so. I invite you to join me in singing Hail the Glorious Golden City, a hymn written by Felix Adler for the Ethical Culture Society of New York City, a favorite hymn of ours here. As I mentioned earlier, the last couple of days, my wife Annie and I have been sharing the joy of going up to Mill Creek to be with our daughter and her wife and this little guy, little Wyatt, to help them out with their afternoon rests and chores and things. And my favorite part, of course, is sitting there and having him in my arms and waiting until his breathing and my breathing are in sync. And he just falls very helplessly to sleep, and it's just a little bit of loving putty. And the feeling of that kind of harmonious coexistence, I think, is an experience we all yearn for and look for in our lives, especially with our loved ones and our neighbors and our friends, and I think even deep down with our enemies and those who are so different from us too, trying to reclaim a sense of joyous unity as participants in life. If you see God, may God be with you. If you embrace life, may life return your affection. And if you seek a way, may a path be found, and the courage and companionship to take it, step by step. The service is over. Go in peace to love and serve. Amen.